It's late, I know, but I'm glad you're here. Tonight, we're going to talk about what it was like, truly like, to ride with the Mongol army. Not in legend, not in hindsight, but in your body, your bones, your blistered hands. The cold, the quiet, the violence, the smell, the rules that could get you killed, and the strange, spiritual silence of a people who believed the wind carried messages from the sky. If you enjoy stories like this, you can always subscribe, but only if it brings you peace. Let me know where you're listening from, or what time it is, or if you'd survive one night on the steppe. Now, dim the lights and let's drift back in time. You wouldn't notice it right away. The silence, I mean, it's not the kind of silence you get in a soundproof room or at a rural Airbnb with no signal. It's an older silence, one that belongs to the land, not to you, and it stretches flat, wide, indifferent across a sea of frozen grass. There are no cities here, no towns, no paths worn deep by centuries of wheels, just grass, wind, and sky, and the hooves of 1,000 horses that never stop moving. You are standing somewhere on the Mongolian steppe, roughly in the year 1210 of the Common Era. It's winter, or maybe spring. The seasons here lie to you, switching faces like a trickster god. It can be bright blue and below freezing. The air cuts your throat when you breathe, but the horizon is clear to clear, and that's what should worry you. You haven't seen a tree in days, only the shuddering hides of yurts and the men who ride like spirits in dust. They don't talk much. Mongol soldiers, when they speak, do it low, like they're telling secrets to the earth. Even the horses make little sound, short, stocky, tough. These aren't war horses like in Europe. They're shorter than you expect, shaggier, and infinitely more important, because you do not matter here, not your hunger, not your memories, not the fact that you have blisters in places you didn't know could blister. The only thing that matters is the horse, and that you keep up your cold. Not the kind of cold that makes you shiver, but the kind that makes you forget you ever weren't. Your breath is shallow, your lips are cracked. You haven't eaten since dusk yesterday, but you drank something this morning, something thick, white, and sour. Fermented mare's milk. Airag, it burns, but it's all there is. A man next to you, elder, with a scar that cuts across his cheek like a whip-marked, pulls a piece of dried meat from his saddlebag. He doesn't offer you any. Instead, he gestures toward the east. There's a shadow moving fast across the horizon. Dust, wind, and maybe something worse. The signal is clear. Mount up. Because in the Mongol army, you don't ask questions, you don't rest, you don't complain, you ride. And if you fall behind, even once, you won't be asked why. You'll simply stop being part of the story. You don't name your horse. That would be sentimental, and sentiment is dangerous. Here softness, after all, gets eaten first. This isn't your horse anyway. You've got 4, maybe 5, tied together in a string. You ride one at a time, switching them out before they get tired. It's the closest thing to tenderness in this life, preserving the strength of the animal that carries you further than your own muscles ever could. Mongol warriors ride as if they were born in the saddle, because they were. Children learn to ride before they can walk. By 3 or 4 years old, they're herding livestock across open plains. By 7, they can shoot a bow from horseback while standing, twisting, galloping full speed. You try to hold the reins like they do, loose, confident, but your fingers are already stiff with cold, and you grip too hard. The horse jerks beneath you, annoyed. This one is grey, streaked with dust. Thick winter coat, smells like smoke and sweat. Its ears flick back at your clumsy hands. The man beside you watches, doesn't speak, but he knows. You're not one of them. It's not just the way you ride or the way you look. It's something deeper, something older. You're soft, still dreaming of home. They don't have homes here, not in the way you mean. The Mongol yurt is collapsible. Everything folds, everything moves. The idea of permanence walls, gardens, heirlooms is foreign, almost laughable. They live like the wind, and they expect you to keep up. The horse beneath you knows the way better than you do. You try to guide it. It ignores you, not out of rebellion, but because it doesn't need you. You're a passenger, a liability at best. Every few hours, you switch horses. Leap off one, leap onto the next, without breaking stride. If you hesitate, if your foot slips, if your weight throws off the rhythm someone sees, no one comments, no one comforts, but someone always sees. The herd moves like a single thought, spreading and coalescing as needed. Communication is minimal. A whistle, a gesture, a tilt of the head. You realize, with a dull pang, language is slower than instinct, and here, slowness is a death sentence. The army stretches for miles, widening and contracting like lungs. You're not marching in straight lines. You're not grouped by rank or nationality. You're traveling in squads, clusters of 10, known as Arban. 10 of those form a Zuin, 100-man unit. 10 Zuins become a Mingana, 1,000. The organization is precise, brutal in its efficiency. Every man is responsible not just for himself, but for his Arbon. If one man runs, all 10 pay. If one deserts, all 10 are punished. If one speaks out of turn, there are no second chances. You are part of a body now, a living weapon, honed for speed, silence, and terror. And yet, in the middle of it all, something strange happens. A boy maybe 12 years old passes you on horseback. He's got a hawk on his arm and a look in his eyes that's older than the mountains. He nods, not kindly, not cruelly, just nods. As if to say, you're here, you exist. For now, and in that moment, the world feels a little less wide, a little less cold, but only for a moment, because a horn blows in the distant steppe, mournful like the sky itself is groaning. It's time to move, and here, movement is survival. It doesn't matter what you believed before, not your gods, your laws, your stories about good and evil. Those are souvenirs, now keepsakes from a life that's been quietly buried under snow and time. Out here, there is only one law, the yasa, not written down, not carved into stone, but living past mouth to ear, bone to bone, through discipline and blood. Genghis Khan's code, harsh, unforgiving, clear, stealing from your comrade. Death, fleeing in battle. Death, disrespecting your officer, your horse, or your duty. Death, and not theatrical death. No speeches, no drama, just a quick decision, a clean arrow, a body left behind. You wonder how such a strict system can survive in such a wild place. But that's the trick. It survives because of the wildness. Because rules are the only warmth some men have. The Mongol army is not a band of raiders. Not anymore. It's an empire of movement. A state on horseback. It brings its law with it to the sands of Persia, the forests of Poland, the mountains of China. And the yasa, though sometimes vague, often terrifying, is strangely democratic. A prince is punished the same as a peasant. Rank means little when you disobey. What matters is loyalty. What matters is unity. You're still learning the rules. For instance, you do not wash your clothes in running water. It insults the spirits. You do not step over a fire, even if it's dead. The fire remembers. You never urinate facing the wind. It carries offense to the sky. And you never, ever take food without offering it first. Even if you're starving, you saw it once, just after you joined. A man skinny, jittery, not from around here, reached for a piece of dried mutton without the nod from his Arban leader. No one shouted, but by nightfall he was gone. No one spoke of it. No one explained. There is a gravity here, a silence that teaches more than any lesson. You feel it when the older men speak low over fermented milk, passing cups clockwise. You feel it when the officers pray before battle not to a god, but to the eternal blue sky, the Tengri, Sky Father, not a deity who listens or judges, but one who sees. It's an idea that slips under your skin, that everything is watched, that your choices matter, even when no one speaks of them. You begin to understand why they are the way they are, the sharpness, the coldness. It's not cruelty, it's compression. When every decision is survival, there is no room for softness. But there is something else too. When a comrade falls in battle, his horses are sung to. When a child is born in the yurt, strangers come bearing food. When a rider loses a brother, men weep openly, their foreheads pressed to the earth. The law is not just punishment, it's the thread that holds the fabric. Tight, itchily tight. But without it, everything would fray. Tonight, as the sky darkens and the wind begins to howl low across the steppe, you wrap yourself in a sheepskin cloak. You do not ask for more. You do not complain. You're learning. Because to survive the Mongol army is not to conquer, it is to submit. Not in weakness, but in rhythm. And you're starting to hear the beat. You would think they eat well, these warriors. Riders who conquer kingdoms, sack cities, and strip empires to their bones. But there is no feast on the steppe. Not in the way you imagine. There is no bread, no spice, no olive oil pooled on clay plates. Just meat, milk, and the endless hunger between the two. Your first true meal is a test in itself. A hunk of dried mutton hard as wood, greyish white from salt and wind. It takes you 10 minutes to chew one bite. Your jaw aches, your throat rebels, but there's no waste here. You eat everything, or you offend the host, the herd, the spirits. The fire is small, low, almost apologetic. They do not sit around it for comfort. They crouch, hunched like shadows, letting the smoke curl into their clothes. There is no talking, just the crackle and the occasional horse snort in the dark. When the meat is gone, someone pours the broth, thick and fatty, the color of old bone. You drink it quickly, not because it tastes good, it doesn't, but because it's warm. And warm things are rare here. You look around, the men have already finished. Some chew on curdled cheeserel, sun-dried and sour. Others pass a leather pouch of fermented milk. The smell alone makes your stomach twist, but you drink when it comes to you, because refusing would mean something, and everything means something out here. They do eat horses sometimes. It's not common, not preferred, but in deep winter, when the goats are gone and the sheep grow thin, a sick or old horse might be slaughtered. Its blood is drained, first caught in wooden bowls, stirred with warm water, drunk as a blessing and a meal. You haven't seen it yet, but you've heard the stories. You've seen the knives long, curved past from father to son, and you've started to understand. Food here is never just food. It is a survival ritual, a kultura wispain. The act of eating connects them to their ancestors. The act of sharing ties them to each other. They do not eat for joy. They eat to remember. You wonder, sometimes, if they ever knew pleasure in food. If there's a grandmother somewhere who once made sweets from goat fat and berries, humming softly to herself. If there were once lovers who licked cream from fingers under furs. But if those moments existed, they are not spoken of here. Not on the march. Not in war. You curl up that night on a mat of felt, wrapped in a second-hand cloak, listening to the wind slide across the yurt's thin walls. Your stomach is full. Not satisfied, but full. And that is enough to call this a good day. The stars above shimmer faintly through the smoke hole in the roof. No gods here, no heavens. Just the endless watching sky. Somewhere to the west, a town is burning. You won't hear about it until next week. But its fate was sealed the moment the Mongols turned east. You shift, pull the cloak tighter. You do not speak, because there is no room for softness. But there is always room for silence. The air changes. You feel it before anyone says a word. It's not colder, not exactly, but quieter in a way that's harder to name. The horses stop snorting. The men stop whispering. Even the wind, usually so eager to hum its ghost songs through the yurts, holds its breath. You wake up before dawn, not because anyone calls you, but because your body senses what's coming. Your hands are stiff. Your back aches. You slept in your boots. You were told to, in case you had to run, or ride, or fight. But nobody runs in the Mongol army, not unless they're ordered to, and not unless they want their brothers to die with them. You sit up slowly. The world is still grey, the light weak and metallic. Outside, the camp is already in motion. No shouting, no banners, just movement. Quiet, practiced, inevitable. A man passes you a strip of meat. You chew it without thinking. You'll need the salt. Another man checks your saddle. Not out of kindness, but necessity. Your horse isn't just your transport. Is your weapon, your shield, your escape, your companion. If it stumbles, you die. Today, you will ride. And maybe you will kill. It's not your first battle, but it might be your first real one. You've been with the rear guard. You've done the marching, the guarding, the listening. But today, they need more bodies. And your time has run out. You don't know where you are. Somewhere north of the Yellow River, maybe. Or maybe near Bu. The names blend together. The maps are useless. You go where they tell you, and when they say ride, you ride. The man who leads your arbin is silent. He hasn't spoken a full sentence in 3 days. He adjusts the string on his composite bow, tests the tension. He'll shoot from horseback at full gallop while turning sideways, and he'll hit what he's aiming at. He always does. You envy that. You try not to think about dying, but the thought creeps in anyway, like smoke under a door. What will they do if you fall? Will they remember your name? Do they even know it? There are no personal stories here. No letters home. No campfire confessions. Only orders. Only the rhythm of hooves and the whistle of arrows. You check your bow again. It's smaller than the ones you knew back home, but it's stronger, made of wood, sinew, and horn. It took someone weeks to make this. You hope it doesn't fail you. The army assembles in silence. No drums, no horns, no flashy armor. Their uniforms are leather, fur, and bone. They do not glitter. They absorb light. And then a signal. A falcon released into the air. It circles, then dives. You mount your horse. You adjust your quiver. You take one last breath of smoke and cold milk. And then you ride. There is no glory here, only survival. only the blue sky above, watching. It's not the scream that stays with you. There often isn't one. It's the sound just before. The moment the wind breaks differently. The snap of the bowstring, quiet as a heartbeat. The gasps of quick when a man realizes he's already dead. Mongol warfare is not cinematic. It does not wait for you to be ready. There are no charges with banners flapping in golden light. There is no time for speeches, for brotherhood, for the dramatic surge of courage. What there is efficiency. The enemy doesn't see you until it's too late. That's by design. The Mongols don't want to fight fair. They want to win. You're riding in a wide crescent now, a tactic older than your ancestors' gods. You flank without sound. Your Arban moves like shadows slipping over ice. You've trained for this for weeks, even if you didn't know it. They taught you to hold your breath before release, to feel the bow as part of your body, to track wind and distance by instinct, not thought. And when it begins, when the first volley arcs into the grey morning sky, you don't feel brave. You feel small. You feel awake. The arrows rain down, not in chaos, but in timing. You shoot not to kill individually, but to dissolve formations, break the enemy's line, disorient their rhythm. Let panic do the rest. A man falls beside you. You don't know his name. No one pauses. You ride past him, faster now, into the blur. The enemy tries to chase. That's the trap. You break off, turn, scatter each rider, pulling away in different directions, like smoke. The enemy follows, believing in the chase. But behind them, another unit waits, hidden, patient. When the enemy's rear is exposed, the real strike comes fast, silent, over. This is not war, this is choreography, and you're starting to understand your place in the dance. You shoot twice more. You don't know if the arrows hit. Your hands are numb. Your horse breathes hard beneath you. You lean low. You follow the movement, the pattern, the rhythm. You are not a soldier. You are a ghost. And for the first time, you understand why they win. It's not because of their numbers, not because of fear. It's because they know how to disappear and how to return like breath, like vengeance. The sun rises a little higher now, but you don't feel warmer. You just keep moving, because movement is life. And the steppe never forgives those who stand still. They do not tell you about the smell, not just of blood, that metallic, cloying sweetness that hangs in your nostrils for hours, but of sweat soaked into armor, of earth torn by hooves, of panic, which has a scent all its own, sharp, bitter, unmistakable. They do not tell you about the way time bends, how a moment can stretch into eternity when your arrow is mid-air, how an hour can vanish as you ride, breathe, release, reload, how the sun seems to hover in the sky, waiting for the outcome, impartial as a god. They do not tell you what happens after the arrows stop, after the enemy breaks and flees or falls, after the silence returns. It isn't peace that comes, it's inventory. You ride slowly back through the aftermath. There is no music, no triumph, only counting. Who is missing? Who is still alive? The bodies are not wept over, not now. There is work to do. Looting, if permitted. Burial, if required. Burning, sometimes if disease is suspected. You dismount stiffly. Your legs shake. Your fingers refuse to unclench. You stare at a body in the grass, a man, your age, perhaps, or younger. His eyes are still open. He looks surprised. You tell yourself he's not looking at you, but he is. The veterans walk past without slowing. They've seen it before, too many times. You think of the stories you were told, back when war was still abstract. You imagined battle as glorious, romantic, cinematic. But here, the glory is practical, efficiency is virtue, and death is just a function. Someone hands you a water skin. You drink without thinking. The liquid is warm and sour, but it settles your stomach. A man from your Arban says something in a dialect you don't know. You nod. It seems to satisfy him. You realize then how little you understand. Not just the language, but the logic, the rhythm, the reasons. You joined for adventure, maybe, or gold, or escape. But none of those things matter now. Now, you are part of something that does not care why you came. Only that you obey. Only that you ride. Only that you kill and survive and kill again. The dead are collected. The wounded are treated or left. You do not question who lives and who doesn't, because the Mongol army does not waste time. They move on, and so do you. You mount your horse again, this one wet with sweat and streaked with mud. You do not know its name, but you feel grateful for it, just the same. The sky is vast, above your end interrupted, pale, endless. You exhale slowly and ride, because there are more towns ahead, and the sun waits for no one. It's easy to imagine that conquest is about strength, muscle, fury, overwhelming numbers. But here, in the Mongol ranks, you learn the truth. Power is not loud. It is quiet, repetitive, relentless. You wake each morning before light, not from alarm or command, but from instinct. Your body knows, now, stillness is punished, and readiness is rewarded. There is no formal drill, no barking sergeant, no grand parade. Just routine. You check your tack. You inspect your bow. You test your horse's hooves, its breath, its temper. Every man is responsible for his own perfection, and every mistake is seen, not always punished, sometimes worse just. Noticed, the discipline is internal. You follow the rhythm not because someone forces you, but because the rhythm keeps you alive. A man who forgets his arrows, dead. A man who hesitates at a command, dead. A man who argues, who asks too many questions, who stands when he should kneel, dead. Not immediately, but eventually. The army makes room for errors in the same way the steppe does. It buries them. You've started to speak less, not out of fear, but because words feel unnecessary. Your hands talk to your horse. Your shoulders talk to your squad. Your eyes track the wind. When you do speak, it is simple, clipped, efficient. Where, when, how many. No embellishment, no poetry. Poetry is for later. If you live, you watch the older men. One chews bark before battle. Another ties knots into his bootlaces for luck. Rituals, quiet and strange, carried from forgotten mothers and half-remembered mountains. They never explain, but they notice when you copy them, and sometimes they nod. You understand now why the Mongols could vanish and reappear across half the world. It's not sorcery, it's not brute force. It's discipline, the discipline of knowing your place, of trusting the system more than yourself, of obeying when it makes no sense, and riding anyway. The Mongol army is not just a machine, it is an organism, a nervous system that spans hundreds of miles, sensing, reacting, evolving. Orders are passed not by scroll or proclamation, but by gesture. A raised hand, a hawk released, a rider vanishing toward the horizon. You learn to read it, you learn to obey it. Not because you believe in Genghis, not because you care about conquest, but because, to stay alive, you must become invisible within it. And slowly, you do. You stop asking who the enemy is. You stop wondering where you are. You ride, you fight, you sleep, you eat what you're given, and the days blur like hoofprints in dry grass. You are no longer a guest in this army. You are part of it. And when the next order comes, you do not ask why. You mount your horse, and you disappear. The fog rolls in without warning. 1 minute, the air is sharp and dry. The next, the world fades into a blur of pale grey. You can see your hands, your horse's mane, the breath from your own lips, but not much else. The horizon disappears. Voices muffle. Shapes soften into memory. You'd think this would cause panic. In most armies, it might. But the Mongols have always belonged to the invisible. They were ghosts before the fog came. Now, it just confirms what the world already feared. No one stops moving. That's the first unsettling thing. They don't pause to regroup, to call out formations or light torches. They ride deeper into the cloud, as if it's home, as if they were waiting for it. You follow, because that's what you do now. The sound of hooves is dampened by the air. It creates the illusion that you're alone, even though you know you're not. You can sense the riders nearby, their breath, their presence, like being surrounded by wolves that choose not to strike yet. A shout cuts through the mist, short, sharp. It's a signal, but you don't know what it means. Still, you turn your horse. Your body responds faster than your mind. The fog doesn't scare them. They use it. In these moments, the Mongols become what their enemies fear most. A force without form. A weapon without a face. Ambushes are not accidents. They are arrangements. Carefully rehearsed, timed with nature, calculated by those who've learned to speak the language of weather and silence. You hear arrows, not the bows. Those are too quiet, just the whistle. The sudden thud of impact. Somewhere, a man cries out, but not for long. You stay low in your saddle, scanning for motion. You see nothing. Only the curling shapes of fog and shadow, drifting like ancient spirits. And then, out of the grey a rider emerges. He's from your Arban face, smeared with mud, bow in one hand, a single finger raised to his lips. Silence, you nod. There is no panic in your chest, only a thrum. Not fear but alertness, a readiness that feels almost like peace. The battle is over before it begins. The enemy never even sees your faces, just the shapes, the hooves, the death that comes from nowhere. And when it's done, you ride again, still inside the fog, still quiet. You pass bodies, some yours, most not. You do not stop, you do not look long. The fog will lift eventually. The sun will return, indifferent and wide-eyed. But for now, you live inside the myth. Not a man, not even a soldier. Just a whisper in the cold. There's a question that hovers unspoken, unanswered up every battlefield. What happens to those who surrender? You've wondered, before the fog, before the blood, before your name faded from your own mouth. You used to ask what kind of man Genghis Khan was, what he did to the ones who laid down their weapons. Now you no longer ask, because you've seen the answer. And it isn't rage, it isn't vengeance, it's calculation. Mercy in the Mongol army is not weakness, it's strategy. Sometimes those who surrender are spared. Cities that open their gates early, towns that kneel before the hooves touch the dust, they may survive. Their leaders may be allowed to rule under new banners. Their artisans kept alive, their engineers conscripted, their children absorbed into the empire. But only if it's useful, only if it's clean. If a city resists if even once, it draws blood, it signs its own death sentence. You saw it in Nishpa, or maybe it was Merv. The names are blurred now, like old ink left in the rain. They resisted, briefly, bravely, foolishly, and when they fell forever. Every man, woman, child, gone, not out of malice, but as a message, do not resist. That is what mercy looks like here, the chance to obey early. You remember riding past what used to be a village, nothing left but ashes and silence. Even the dogs were gone. Your Arban leader looked down at the scorched earth and said only one word, late. That was all. Mercy doesn't come with softness. It comes with timing. The Mongols do not fight to prove they can. They fight when it is profitable. They spare when it is useful. They move on when it is wise. You try to understand this, to hold it in your chest without breaking, because somewhere under the leather and ash, you still believe in the idea of kindness. But here, kindness is measured in utility. A child who can tend sheep, a blacksmith who can repair saddles, a woman who knows how to cure hides. These things are useful. These things are spared. Others disappear. You begin to see the world not as fair or unfair, but as efficient. The sky does not love you. The steppe does not weep for you, and the Khan does not know your name. But if you ride hard enough, if you obey and adapt, and do not flinch, you might live to see another fog, another fire, another day. And in this army, that is the highest mercy there is. The wind blows differently today, colder, thinner, as if it's passing over something ancient. You're told to dig, not a grave, not exactly. It's more like a memory. The commanders say you'll camp here tonight. But before the yurts can rise and the horses can rest, the ground must be cleared. And that means unearthing what lies beneath. You dig with others, mostly in silence. Your hands are raw. Your back is numb. The soil gives reluctantly, hardened by years and frost. And then you hit something, not stone, not wood, but something brittle, hollow bone. It's not your first time. There are bones everywhere on the steppe, some buried, some scattered like forgotten punctuation, some wrapped still in the tattered memory of cloth, their forms half swallowed by the earth. A jawbone here, a cracked rib, once a child's femur, light as driftwood. The others barely react. A few glance, one spits, but no one stops. You're told this place was once a battleground, then a camp, then a battleground again. Now it's nothing. Just another patch of earth where the cycle continues. You find yourself wondering, how many of these bones were Mongol? How many were Persian? How many spoke languages now lost to time? But no one answers, because no one asks. History here is not told in words. It is felt in the spine. It is lifted out of the soil in fragments, and then ignored. You pile the bones in a cart to be burned or buried later. There is no ceremony, no prayers. This army does not stop to mourn. There is too much still to conquer. But at night, as the fire crackles and the stars reopen their eyes above you, you remember the skull you held earlier, hair still clinging to one side, jaw lopsided, as if it had died mid-sentence. You wonder what it said, that last moment, if it begged, if it cursed, if it simply stared, like you did. They tell you glory is eternal, that to ride with the Khan is to live forever in stories and songs. But stories fade, songs change, and bones remain. You lie down on your mat of felt, the fire warming only one side of your face, and for a long time you listen to the horses breathing, to the men shifting, to the wind moving across the bones you didn't find, and you ask yourself, quietly, will anyone dig me up? Will they notice I was here? Or will I, too, become part of the ground? Just another whisper beneath the steppe. There is no postal service on the steppe, no wax seals, no messengers with satchels of longing. And yet, you think in letters. Every night, before sleep, your mind composes words no one will read. Not to the Khan, not to the gods, but to the people who disappeared behind you when you joined the ride. You write to your brother, though you haven't spoken in years. You imagine his face as it was when you left, younger, suspicious. You tell him you're still alive, that your hands are calloused, that you've learnt to drink milk that burns going down. You don't tell him about the boy who died beside you last week. You don't know how. You write to a woman, though you were never hers. You remember how she laughed, brief, nasal, a little cruel. You imagine she's married now, probably happy, probably doesn't think of you. You tell her that the stars here are the same, that you sometimes whisper her name into your horse's mane, just to say it aloud. You write to your mother, always last, because it hurts the most. You try to imagine what she'd say if she could see you now, dressed in skins, smelling of smoke and iron. You tell her you're eating enough, that your boots are still holding together, that you said thank you last night, even though no one heard. These letters, of course, don't exist. They live only in the space between wakefulness and sleep, but they're real in the way dreams are real, real in the way grief is. The Mongol army does not write home. There are no keepsakes in the saddlebag, no carved tokens, no bits of lace or cloth pressed close to the heart. Emotional softness is a danger. It makes you hesitate, and hesitation kills. But the mind resists discipline in ways the body cannot. So you write silently, inwardly. You shape words out of memory and regret. You fold them into the folds of your blanket. You tuck them into the breath between gallops. One night, a man beside you speaks aloud. Just one sentence. I used to have a son. Then nothing more. He rolls over and sleeps. You don't ask, you never ask. But in the dark, you add one more line to your unsent letter. I heard a man say he had a son. I think he was brave. I hope someone remembers. The stars do not answer. The wind carries no reply. But still, you write, because even ghosts need to talk, and even killers dream of home. You are called to witness, not summoned, not warned, just directed. A gesture from a superior, a tilt of the chin, and then you follow. There's no crowd, no arena, no raised platform, only a clearing, sparse, quiet, surrounded by horses who blink slowly, as if unimpressed by human failure. The man kneeling in the center looks like anyone else. Same boots, same furs, same short sword strapped to his side. But he is guilty. The crime you don't know, you're not told. Maybe he fell asleep on watch. Maybe he took food before it was offered. Maybe he disobeyed. In the Mongol army, punishment is not personal. It is structural. A reminder, not a revenge. You watch as a commander speaks not loudly, not cruelly, just a few words. The man doesn't beg. He doesn't cry. He bows his head. The blow is swift. An axe, not ornate, not poetic, functional. When the body slumps forward, there's a moment where everything holds still, even the wind. And then, movement. The commander nods. To others lift the body. A third begins to dig. There is no mourning period, no eulogy. You are dismissed before the whole is finished. You return to your horse. Your hands tremble, not from horror, but from clarity. This could be you, not for betrayal, but for slowness, for softness, for something you didn't even realize you did. The Mongol army doesn't punish to correct. It punishes to maintain shape, to shave down the edges of individuality until the unit moves as one. Like a flock, like a wave, like breath. You do not sleep well that night. Every movement feels like it carries weight. Every word you almost speak gets swallowed back. You begin to move more precisely. You check your gear twice. You wake earlier, not out of fear, not exactly, but out of understanding that in this life, obedience isn't submission, it's preservation, and that mercy isn't the absence of punishment. It's the chance to ride another day. It does not flap in the wind. It does not glitter in sunlight or trail dramatically across a battlefield. The banner of the Mongol Empire is made of horsehair. Dark, still. It hangs like a curtain of silence, and it means everything. It's called the Sold. A war standard, yes, but more than that. It is a spirit, an embodiment of the Khan's divine right to conquer, a symbol not just of leadership, but of destiny. You see it for the first time at dawn, barely visible in the half-light. Its hair barely stirs, though the wind pushes against your cheeks. It seems to stand outside the rules of nature, unmoving, unyielding. The men around it bow their heads, not out of worship, but reverence. You do the same. No one explains what it means, not directly, but you learn, over time, in glances and silences and gestures, that when the black-souled is raised, it is war. When the white-souled flies, it is peace, simple, stark, immutable. You ask someone, quietly, where the hair comes from. He shrugs. The mane of the Khan's best stallion, he says. Then, after a pause, and the ones who came before, you feel something tighten in your chest, because you realize this banner is not a flag. It is a lineage of movement, of conquest, of belief. No words are written on it, no colors, no symbols, just the absence of decoration, just the weight of history. Later, you learn that some men whisper prayers to it before battle, not aloud just with their eyes. Others refuse to ride ahead of it. Superstition, perhaps, or survival. And you, in your quiet moments, begin to feel its presence too, as if it watches, as if it listens. There are times when you wonder what would happen if it fell, if someone cut it down, burned it, tore it to pieces. But you never say this out loud, not because you fear reprisal, but because some thoughts are heavier than death, and the wind might carry them back to the Khan. The Sold does not weep. It does not shout. It does not forget. And when you sleep beneath it, in the hush of night, you dream not of glory, but of silence, of hooves in the dark, of the stillness that rides before destruction. You wake before dawn. The banner is still there, unmoving, watching. They don't tell you what to do when the fire is your own. Not the flames from enemy torches those you expect. Not the kindling lit in a foreign temple, but the quiet kind. The kind that begins inside you. It starts with fatigue. Not the kind you can sleep off, but the kind that settles in your bones, like smoke in a yurt's rafters. You ride, but your body no longer feels like yours. You eat, but the taste is ash. You sleep and wake more tired than before. No wound bleeds, no fever burns, but you are dying just slower than usual. They call it the fading. No one speaks of it directly, but every rider knows. It happens after too many winters, too many screams, too many nights staring at the stars, wondering why they never blink. You see it in others first. A man stops tying his boots with care. Another forgets to oil his bowstring. Someone begins to speak too much or too little. Soon, the slip becomes a pattern, and the pattern becomes danger. In the Mongol army, there is no room for broken pieces. If you cannot be sharpened, you are discarded. You try not to let it show. You force yourself to laugh when others do. You double-check your gear, even when no one's watching. You keep your horse groomed, your posture stiff, your eyes cold, but the fire doesn't care. It flickers on anyway. Inside, one night, an older man pulls you aside. His beard is silver. His eyes are tired in a way you recognize. You need to leave something behind, he says. You blink. What do you mean? Something true. Before you forget what that is. He says no more. But the words lodge inside you, hot and aching. You think about carving your name into your saddle. You think about hiding a letter in the folds of your yacht. You think about singing a song, quietly, when no one else is near. Just once. But in the end, you do nothing. Because even that feels dangerous. Instead, you rise again, mount your horse, swallow the fire, and ride. Because, in the Mongol army, there are only two paths: burn quietly or disappear completely. You choose the first. For now, but the fire waits. It always waits. You start to notice the sky more than anything else. Not because it's beautiful, though it is, sometimes in a way that's painful, but because it never leaves. It's there when you ride, when you fight, when you bury your dead. It watches you sleep. It witnesses your mistakes. To the Mongols, the eternal blue sky is not metaphor. It's a presence, a power, a god, though they rarely use that word. They call it Tengri, not someone who listens to prayers, but someone who sees. You were raised on different gods, perhaps on temples and scrolls, on saints or sacrifice. But out here, none of that survives the wind. Only the sky remains. And it is indifferent. It does not promise justice. It does not offer comfort. But it is fair in the way gravity is fair. If you fall, it does not ask why. If you succeed, it does not applaud. It simply watches. The Khan himself claims his authority from Tengri. Not birthright, not blood, but favor. He was chosen, they say, not because he was the strongest, but because the sky wanted him. And so, when he gives a command, it is not just his voice you hear. It is the voice of the wind, of the blue. You begin to understand how power works here. Not through fear, exactly, but through inevitability. When the Khan says ride, you ride. When he says raise, you raise. When he says nothing, you listen harder. There are no temples, no altars, just the endless above. Sometimes, when you can't sleep, you stare at it for hours. You ask questions you never say aloud. Does it remember who I was? Does it see who I've become? But the sky answers only in light, in shadow, in weather. One day, a lightning storm rolls across the horizon. You and your arbon take cover under thick hides, but you watch as one of the horses bolts, terrified. A man chases it. The bolt strikes not the horse, but the man. He dies without a sound. His hair smokes. His skin splits. No one says it aloud. But the message is clear. Tengri took him. The men bury him quickly, without question. No mourning, just respect. You realize then that out here, death is not random. It is read like scripture. The wind speaks, the sky judges, and you are very, very small. There are no contracts here, no scrolls, no signatures, no seals pressed in wax. Your loyalty is not written, it is spoken, once, and then held like breath. You took the oath months ago, though time has little meaning now. You stood before a man who did not smile. You held out your hands, not upward in plea, but outward in offering, and you said what you were told to say. You didn't fully understand the words, but you knew what they meant, that you belonged, now, not just to the army, but to something older, larger, more merciless than any nation, and that if you broke your word, the sky itself might break you. In Mongol tradition, oaths are not made lightly. They are sacred, not because they are rare but because they are irreversible. To break an oath is to rupture the thread that holds the world together. You've seen what happens to oath breakers. One man, a scout, may be deserted after a failed raid, tried to vanish into the mountains. He made it 6 days. They caught him, eventually, did not kill him at once. They tied him to the back of his own horse, made the horse walk. Slowly, by the time they returned, there was little left that could stand. They did not speak of it afterward, just resumed the ride. You learned, without anyone saying so, that some punishments are not about pain, they are about remembrance, and that breaking your word here is not just a betrayal of men. It is a betrayal of sky. There are other kinds of oaths too, quieter ones, like the way men touch their chest when passing a battlefield, the way they pour the first sip of milk onto the ground before drinking. These are not laws, they are promises, to the dead, to the land, to the rhythm. You start to make your own. You swear not to speak when the stars are out. You swear to always thank your horse, even if just with a breath. You swear to remember the names of the ones who die near you even if no one else does. These oaths are not spoken aloud, but they bind you just the same. Because out here, there is no audience, no confession booth, no ritual absolution. There is only the dust, the sky, and your word. And if that breaks, nothing else matters. They do not leave their dead where they fall, not if they can help it. Even in conquest, even amid scorched earth and razed cities, the Mongols bury their own. It's not sentiment, it's order. There's a system, as there always is. The body is wrapped in felt, if there's enough, or in horsehide, if not. Sometimes they dig a pit. Sometimes they find a crevice in the rock. And if neither is possible, they place the body beneath stones, enough to keep away scavengers, enough to let the spirit go. They don't speak during burial, no prayers, no speeches, just the task and the silence that holds it. You helped bury a boy last week. No one told you to. You just saw the way the others stood around him, waiting, not mourning, and you stepped forward. He was maybe 15, his face still round with youth, but marked by days of dust and sun. You didn't know his name, but you carried one side of the body, and that was enough. When the last rock was placed, the commander said just 4 words. He was fast, loyal. Then he turned, mounted his horse, and rode on. You stayed behind for a moment, not to cry. That's not what this place allows, but to listen, to hear whether the wind noticed, whether the sky shifted, just slightly, to make space for him. It didn't, not that you could tell, but the act of listening felt holy, somehow, like you were part of something old. Later, you asked someone why they bothered to bury the dead at all. He looked at you, blankly. Because we're not animals. And then he laughed, not cruelly, just dry, as if to say, though we are close, you begin to see the strange kindness in it, the geometry of care, measured in shallow graves and remembered names. Not love, not grief, but respect. It's not much, but it's more than some get. You tell yourself you'll remember that boy's face, that if you ever leave this place, you'll speak of him, give him a name, even if it isn't his. Because the sky may not mourn, but you can, just a little, just enough. No one here carries a map, not the kind you'll use to parchment, with rivers drawn in blue and cities circled in gold. The Mongol army doesn't need that. They carry the world in their bodies, in the way their horses move across terrain, in the way they smell the air before a storm, in the way they know, without speaking, where the next water lies. The steppe teaches a different kind of geography, not lines, but instincts, not landmarks, but rhythms. You try to understand it, to trace in your mind where you are, where you've been, but it all blurs. The land doesn't change, just shifts in texture, flatter, rockier, wetter, colder. They say you've crossed from one empire into another. You didn't notice because the Mongols don't acknowledge borders, not really. To them, the idea of territory is temporary. If your horses can cross it, if your men can conquer it, if your laws can rule it, then it's yours. And when it's no longer useful, it is forgotten. The only constant is movement. And so the army spreads, not like a wave, but like fire, not bound by rivers or mountains or treaties, just opportunity. They ride into cities that once ruled nations. They camp beside temples older than memory. And when they leave nothing behind but smoke. You begin to see how strange the world must look to them, not as a puzzle of nations and flags, but as an open plain, a place meant to be crossed, claimed, ridden. It unsettles you, because you were raised to believe in boundaries, to know what belonged to whom, to respect fences and flags and names carved into stone. But the Mongols name places only when they've taken them, and even then the names don't last long. It is not cruelty, it is philosophy. If a city cannot defend itself, it does not deserve permanence. If a people cannot survive the steppe, they do not belong to history. It is brutal, but it is clear, and in its clarity you begin to find a kind of logic. There is no sentiment in this empire, only survival, and the sky above, always blue, always borderless. It does not look like waving flags. It does not look like soldiers dropping swords and kneeling in rows. Surrender in the Mongol world is quieter, heavier. It begins before the gates open. You see it in the way the villagers move slower, shoulders slumped, eyes flicking toward the horizon. You see it in the markets, emptied not by chaos, but by anticipation, and you hear it in the absence of bells. A city that intends to resist still rings its bells, still calls its people to walls, still clings to pride. But a city that intends to surrender, it goes quiet. The negotiations are not public, they happen in tents, with messengers who ride fast and speak carefully. The terms are always the same: submit, pay tribute, offer hostages, sons, artisans, translators, accept a governor, obey. If they do, they live, sometimes prosper. But no one forgets who holds the reins. You watched a city surrender once, not a large one. Stone walls, a single gate, a temple with faded carvings. They opened the doors at dawn, laid flat in the dirt, brought their children forward first. You expected some mercy, some ceremony, But the Mongol commander simply nodded. He walked the walls, inspected their stores, took their maps, their scholars, their metalsmiths. Then he left a dozen men behind. Not soldiers, scribes, tax collectors, informants. The city would not burn. Not today, but it had been taken. You realized then that surrender was not relief. It was a pause, a breathing space, a temporary mercy granted by men who saw the world as a series of useful silences. The people bowed, but their eyes followed you as you rode out, not with hate, not with fear, but with the hollow look of those who know they no longer write their own story. You looked away, because part of you wanted to say something, to promise something. But the Mongol army does not make promises. It does not liberate. It does not avenge. It absorbs. It utilizes. It moves on, and so do you. By dusk, the city is behind you. The dust is thick. The sky is pale and endless. You don't remember the city's name. No one does. Because surrender, too, is a kind of erasure, gentler than fire, but no less final. You start to notice what the men carry, not the weapons, those are expected, not the arrows, the coils of rope, the blades tucked behind boots, but the other things, the quieter things. A scrap of hide carved with a symbol no one explains, a worn feather tied to a bridle, a small, dented cup tin, maybe, or bronze that catches the morning light just so. These aren't luxuries. There's no space for ornaments. Everything must earn its weight, but these objects endure. You see one man unwrap a piece of cloth each night, then wrap it again with care. He never shows what's inside, but his hands move like prayer. Another sharpens a stone until it's smooth, rounded, warm from his touch. He rolls it in his palm when the wind howls loudest. A younger rider keeps a bundle of horsehair tied to his wrist, not from a living horse. It's too clean, too ceremonial. You suspect it's from one that died. These are the things they do not speak of, not because they're secrets, but because they are theirs. You think of what you carry: a knife, a length of cord, half a comb, a piece of cloth from the shirt you wore the day you arrived. It doesn't smell like you anymore. It smells like smoke and sweat, but you keep it anyway. These small tokens become anchors. They tether you to memory, to humanity, to a version of yourself that existed before this life began. Some men abandon their tokens, leave them behind like snakes shedding skin. Others cling to them like spells, like truths. You wonder what the Khan carries, if he carries anything at all. They say he moves light, that he sleeps under the stars like any soldier, that he drinks from the same bowl, eats from the same pot. But maybe he has something in his saddlebag too, something no one's allowed to see. A child's drawing, a bone flute, a name carved into wood. You'll never know, and maybe that's the point, because what these men carry is not for glory. It's for after, for when the ride ends, for when someone, somewhere, asks, "What did you keep when everything else was lost?" And the answer will not be a sword, or a coin, or a conquest. It will be a stone, a thread, a breath. There is music here. You just have to know where to listen. It's not sung loudly, not chanted around fires or echoed across valleys. The Mongols do not raise their voices unless they must, but the music finds its way out anyway. In the mornings, you sometimes hear a low, humbly audible beneath the sound of hooves. A man singing into his breath, as if afraid to wake the past. The melody repeats, slow and circular, without climax or resolution. It is less a song than a presence. And at night, When the stars hang heavy and no one speaks, someone might pluck a marine kura horsehead fiddle. The sound is not crisp. It warbles, stretches, mourns. It doesn't entertain. It remembers. You've come to learn that the Mongols do not sing to forget. They sing to carry. The melodies are old, older than the Khan, older even than the empire. Passed from mother to son, herder to herder, generation to generation, not in script, but in practice. In sound, sometimes the lyrics are nonsense. Sometimes they are prayers disguised as lullabies. You don't know the words, not all of them, but you begin to learn the feeling. There's one song, a minor strain, played often just before sunrise. You don't know its name, but it always leaves you with the sensation of falling upward, a kind of ache. You ask a rider once what it means. He shrugs. Then after a pause, says, "It's for the horses." He doesn't elaborate. But later, you see him press his head to his mount's neck and whisper the first line. You realize then that these songs are not meant for us. They are not for the enemy, not for history. They are bridges between silence and memory, between man and animal, between land and sky. Music, here, is a survival tool, not to pass the time, but to preserve what time erodes. You begin to hum, quietly, when you ride alone. You don't know what you're singing, but something in you loosens when you do. Maybe it's the memory of your mother. Maybe it's grief you haven't earned yet. Or maybe, just maybe, it's the sound of becoming something else. Something softer beneath the armor. Something still human, even now. The taste never leaves you, even after the battle. Even after the silence, it lingers on your tongue, a blend of smoke, blood, and something older, salt, maybe, or dust. You try to rinse it out with water. You try fermented milk. You chew dried meat until your jaw aches. But it remains. It is not a flavor. It is a residue of fear, of fire, of the kind of hunger that has nothing to do with food. The meals blur together now. The same bowl passed hand to hand. The same chewy strands of mutton, fat clinging to your teeth. The same curds that crack between your molars like old bone. You eat because you must, not because you crave. But still, you begin to notice small preferences. A broth that was boiled longer. A curd that softened in the sun. A strip of meat that tastes slightly more of grass than of death. It's these details that keep you tethered. They won't write songs about the meals in the Mongol army. There is no feast, no celebration, but there is ritual. Every action means something. The first sip is for the earth. The last bite is not wasted. The bowl is passed clockwise, always. There's reverence in the routine. You see a man once take off his hat before eating. Another mutters a line in a language you do not know before he drinks. These aren't performances. They are memory. Traces of lives that existed before the army, before the Khan. You carry these tastes with you, not just in your mouth, in your breath, in your sweat. They mark you. Sometimes, in your sleep, you dream of other flavors bred warm from an oven. Fruit you once held between your teeth and didn't appreciate. And then you wake, dry-mouthed, chewing air. You tell yourself you'll eat those things again, someday. That this is temporary. That after the campaign, after the next city, after the next silence, you'll taste something else. But deep down, you know. This is what food means now. Salt, smoke, fat, function, and a hunger that no meal quite quiets. You forget your own name, eventually, not all at once. not with a gasp or a moment of panic. It slips quietly, like a saddlecloth loosed by wind. At first, it's still there in your mind. A whisper, a syllable you repeat silently before sleep. A shape your lips remember, though they don't use it anymore. But no one calls you by it. Not here. You are referred to by your position, your place in the arbon, your horse's gait, a scar, a mistake. You become the one who fell in the river. Third bow on the right. Quiet one. Names, out here, are not for identity. They are for function. And function is temporary. You watch others lose theirs, too. A man who once introduced himself proudly now just nods when spoken to. Another answers to a grunt. A third no longer speaks at all. It's not cruelty, it's conservation. There are too many deaths to remember, too many stories to carry, so the army trims what is unnecessary, and names are unnecessary. There's a saying passed among the older riders: the steppe does not remember your father's name. You think about that sometimes, especially when you find yourself trying to recall the way your mother used to say yours, softly, maybe, or sharply, depending on the moment. You start to write it with your finger in the dirt, now and then, just once, just the letters. Then you wipe it away before anyone sees, because keeping it feels dangerous, like hiding contraband. One night, a man beside you murmurs a name in his sleep, a woman's name, over and over, like prayer. When he wakes, he looks at you and says nothing, but his eyes are wet. You both pretend not to notice, because out here, grief is a private ritual, a whispered name in the dark. Later, when he dies, you remember it. The name he whispered. You don't say it aloud, but you remember it. And that, you realize, is a kind of resistance. A small rebellion, to carry a name that the world wants to forget. To hold it in your chest. To speak it if only inside your mind. Yours, hers, his. Each one a weight. Each one a tether. And in the silence between battles, between breaths, each one a song. You don't build a fire unless it's safe. That's one of the first things they teach you. Not with words, but with looks. With the sudden absence of warmth. With the way the veterans shake their heads when someone reaches too early for flint. Fire, out here, is not a rite, it's a signal. And if the wrong eyes see it, men die. So most nights, you shiver, even when it's below freezing. Even when your hands are too stiff to string your bow. Even when your breath curls in the air like smoke from a dying prayer. You learn to live with it. To trust the animal heat of the man beside you. To breathe into your palms, then tuck them beneath your arms. To eat cold meat without complaint. But some nights, they allow it. The fire is small, controlled. It doesn't crackle or dance. It glows, sullen and red, like a wound that never closes. You sit around it in silence, not huddled, not close, just near enough to feel something. No one tells stories, no one sings. It's not that kind of fire. It's a fire that reminds you of what you've lost. Not just warmth, but softness, home, ease. You see it in the way men stare into the coals, not with wonder, but with memory. You think of all the fires you sat by before this life, the one in your family's hearth, the one where someone kissed you for the first time, the one where you drank too much and laughed until your ribs ached. None of that is here. Here, the fire is rationed, not for cooking, not for comfort, but for reminding that you are still human, that you still burn. Sometimes someone will toss something into it, a scrap of fur, a bone, a carved piece of wood. They don't explain, But you understand. The fire, too, carries memory, and weight, and grief. You don't share your fire. Not truly. It's not for bonding. It's not for melting barriers. It is the place you look when you've forgotten what your own face looks like, when you want to see something, anything reflected back. You hold your hands out to it, just long enough to feel your fingertips again, and then you let it fade. Let it return to ash. Let the dark fold in, because out here, the fire isn't a friend. It's a ghost, a glimpse. And like everything else the Mongol army allows, it's borrowed. You ask, once, where the capital is. The man you ask doesn't laugh, but he might as well have. His face bends slightly, like someone hearing a child ask where the sun sleeps. There is none, he says. Then, as if clarifying, everywhere. It doesn't make sense to you. You come from a world of capitals and crowns, cities with gates and streets named for saints. You were taught that power lives in stone, in palaces, in maps that thicken around the middle. But in the Mongol Empire, power moves. It rides. The center is wherever the Khan is, and the Khan is never still. You begin to understand it slowly, like dawn bleeding through cloud. The yurt you see today will be gone by tomorrow. The woman who cooked your meat in Samarkand will be herding goats in Karakoram next season. The blacksmith who fixed your bridle speaks 4 languages, none of them permanent. You expect to feel lost, but you don't. You feel suspended, as if the world is no longer built around fixed points, but around motion itself. The Mongol way is to bend, twofold, to carry what matters and leave the rest behind. You start to think of your own body like that, not a house, but a tent, not an anchor, but a vessel. You become lighter. Even your grief feels like something portable now. And when someone dies, there's no monument, no tomb, just a place marked in memory and then forgotten, because the steppe does not stop to weep. You think about this as you ride through wheat fields, across frozen rivers, past cities still smoking from surrender. You begin to see the genius in it. No roads to defend, no castles to besiege, just paths and hooves and endless sky. The empire has no heart, only arteries, and everything flows. One day you pass a group of merchants. They've come from the far west. They speak of cities you thought were myths, and they carry silver stamped with the Khan's seal. Even here, even this far, his face rides before him, not because he planted a flag, but because he sent motion, messages, riders, laws, 1,000 veins pumping toward no center. You look up at the sky, still blue, still vast, and you think, maybe this is what God feels like. Not a figure, but a force, a wind, a will, a presence that never sleeps. You learn to listen with your feet. It starts with a rhythm distant, faint, a tremble through the soles of your boots, like someone knocking softly on the underside of the earth. Hooves. You can tell now when they're yours and when they're not. You can feel the difference between the easy lilt of a patrol and the sharp staccato of urgency. You learn to measure distance not in miles, but in gallops. This is the true language of the Mongol Empire. Not words, not ink, but movement. Information moves faster than armies. They call them yam riders' messengers, trained to run the empire like blood through veins. Their routes stretch thousands of miles, from the Caspian Sea to the edge of Korea. Each rider covers a fixed distance, then hands the message to another. No delay, no sleep, no deviation. They ride alone, sometimes in storms, sometimes into battle zones, sometimes through cities that no longer exist by the time they return. And yet, the message always arrives. because the empire depends on it, on knowledge that moves faster than resistance, on truth that outruns rebellion. You watch them, sometimes these thin, soot-smeared men with eyes like smoked glass. They never linger. They eat in motion, sleep in motion. They speak in gestures and leave before your eyes adjust. To be a yam rider is to vanish, to live without place, only purpose. You envy them a little, because they seem weightless, and you are so heavy with memory. But there is something else. A rumor passed in low tones, when the wind rises and the fire is out, that each rider carries two messages, one sealed in leather to be delivered, and one carved in memory. The second one is spoken only if the first is lost, only if the road ends in fire. It's a form of insurance, but also faith, in the human mind, in breath, in the power of a sentence carried like a prayer. You think about that as you ride. What message would you carry if your body became the scroll? If your mind were the last archive, would you remember a name, a place, a mercy, or just the sound of hooves? The way they write across the earth, the way they say, "We were here." You feel it again now. That soft thunder beneath your boots, coming closer, not a threat, not a warning, just the language of a world that refuses to stand still. There are no signposts, no stone markers, no arches overhead carved with names of emperors or saints, but the roads are there, woven into the earth like veins under skin. The Mongols call it the Ortua relay system, vast and invisible, not built but lived, a nervous system pulsing through the steppe, carrying riders, words, and power. Every 30 miles or so, there's a station. You wouldn't notice it unless you knew what to look for. A cluster of yurts, a tethered line of fresh horses, a man sitting by the fire, watching the horizon like it owes him something. These stations are not towns, not even outposts. They are pauses. They exist only to be passed through. Food is shared. Horses are switched. No one lingers, because the empire doesn't wait. You're told that the Khan himself can receive news from 1,000 miles away in less than a week. Faster than any king, faster than any god. Because while others build walls, the Mongols build roads no one can see. You realize something else, too, that the roads are not just physical. There are roads of trust, of silence, of rhythm. You ride in formation not because you're told, but because you feel it. The breath of the horse beside you, the lean of the man to your left, the subtle shift of hooves before a turn. It's a choreography born from necessity, a road made of habits. Even the sky becomes a kind of compass. At night, you watch the stars, not for poetry, for bearings. The North Star becomes your spine, the moon a clock, the wind a messenger. You begin to understand how this empire holds together, not with stone, not with laws, but with movement. Ceaseless, coordinated, believed in. You think of the empires you've read about, Rome, China, Persia, each built with borders, citadels, declarations. The Mongol Empire is different. It is not where it is where it goes. And you, tired, scarred, silent, you are part of that road now, not a builder, not a traveler, but a path. You can smell it before you see it. A shift in the air, sour with the scent of distance. The wind, once your ally, now presses against your chest like a warning. Something is wrong. The Mongols fear little, but they respect signs, and the wind changing direction is one of them. It brings dust from the west fine bitter, carries with it whispers in unfamiliar tongues. Riders begin to return from the edges with unreadable faces. No one speaks of it aloud, but the silence is heavier. Even the horses twitch more often, as if something unseen tugs at their reins. The camp does not pause, but its rhythm falters, slightly. You notice it in the way men check their weapons more than usual, in how they eat quickly, without looking up, in the absence of music. They say the Khan is far away, that orders are coming, that this is not retreat, but reassessment. You know better, because movement, here, is a kind of language. And now, the sentence is stammering. You ride slower, scout farther, sleep with your bow strung beside you, and still the wind presses. One night, during a pause in marching, a man tells you a story, his voice low, cracking with dust. He speaks of a storm that once buried an entire division. Not from snow, not from flood, but from sand. The desert rose up like a beast and swallowed them whole. Only their banners were found, months later, wrapped around the arms of skeletons. He says this without fear, as if describing whether. Then he turns and sleeps. You stay awake, because you realize something ancient. Even the god of movement must answer to the land. And sometimes, the road leads to silence. You start to dream of home again. Not because you want to return, but because it's the only place that hasn't moved. In your sleep, you walk roads that stay where they are. Stone roads, quiet roads, roads that do not ask who you are becoming. But when you wake, the sky is still endless. The hooves are still pounding, and the wind still presses. Harder now, like a question with no answer. There are places the Mongols do not reach, not because they fail, but because they choose not to. Mountains too steep, forests too dense, islands guarded by sea and sickness. You hear whispers of these places, Japan, Java, the hills beyond the Indus. They are not spoken of with frustration. There is no bitterness, only a kind of acknowledgement, as if even the Khan knows. Some paths do not yield. It confuses you at first. The greatest army the world has known. Thousands of horses, a map with no edges, and yet they stop. Or rather, they swerve. Like a river, they bend around resistance, reroute through opportunity, find other mouths into other seas. Because conquest, here, is not about pride, it is about flow. You begin to realize that the Mongol genius isn't domination, it's adaptation. They wear silk from China, under armor made in Sepakanan. They carry Korans beside Buddhist amulets. They hire Persian engineers to siege Russian forts. They take what works, and leave the rest behind. You think of your own life, all the parts of yourself you shed when you joined this tide, the language you stopped speaking, the God you stopped praying to, the stories you no longer tell. You used to think of these as losses. Now you're not sure. Maybe they're tributaries. Maybe you've just been learning to bend. One night, you hear the commanders speak in low voices about a failed siege, a city in the jungle, disease, rain, walls that swallowed every arrow like they were nothing. The decision is swift. They ride on. You stare into the fire-small, flickering, careful land, wonder what it means to be unconquerable, to be so deeply yourself that even a god of movement lets you be. You think of your mother, of a small patch of garden she used to tend, stubbornly, even in drought. How she once said, some things bloom only because they refuse not to. Maybe that's what's left at the edge of empire. Not victory, not glory, but refusal. And maybe, just maybe, there's something holy in that. The wind dies down, the camp begins to stir again, and you rise, mount, and ride, because you are not done moving. Not yet, but in your chest, something still, something small, something that will not yield. Not ever. You ride for so long that your legs forget how to walk. When you dismount, the earth feels unstable, too still, too firm, as if it's waiting for you to rise again. The horse has become part of your body, your spine, your balance, your breath. You shift your weight when it does. You know its moods better than your own. But eventually, even the strongest horse tires. They don't tell you when it's time. They don't need to. You feel it in the gait. A slowing, a quiet protest in the muscles. You dismount without ceremony. You walk the horse forward, let it rest. Then, if there's another, you switch. If not, you walk. It feels wrong. You're slower, you're exposed. And the step, which once felt like an extension of your will, now feels alien, like it's watching you struggle. You realize then how much of your strength was never yours. It was the hooves, the motion, the animal beneath you that never questioned, never doubted, only carried. You look back at the prints you've left behind. Thousands of them, shallow divots in the dust. A script no one reads. They fade quickly. By the time the sun sets, the wind has erased them. By morning, there will be no sign you will ever hear. And yet, you were. You begin to understand the strange contract you've entered, that to ride is to disappear, to leave behind no monument, only impact, only rumor. You wonder how many cities your hooves helped silence, how many mothers flinched at your shadow, how many prayers were uttered too late. You do not feel proud. You do not feel shame, only echo. And when you close your eyes at night, you hear them still, the hooves, not the ones beneath you, but the ones ahead, always ahead, calling you forward, calling you further. Because in the Mongol army, there is no destination, only distance, only the next rise, the next echo, the next silence waiting to be broken. It doesn't cry out. That's the first thing you notice. There's no whinny, no protest, no warning. Just a sharp exhale, almost human, and then the sound of weight hitting earth. Hard, you stop. So does everyone else in your arban. Not out of concern, out of respect. A fallen horse is not just an inconvenience. It's a wound. The rider dismounts. He doesn't speak. He kneels beside the animal, pressing his hand gently against its side, waiting, listening, accepting. There is no healer, no poultice, no miracle. If the leg is broken, if the breath is ragged, if the wound is deep, then the knife comes out, fast, merciful, final. You turn away, but you listen. The silence afterward is deeper than mourning. It is the kind of silence that fills you with things you don't know how to name. You learn, over time, that horses are rarely buried, not because they aren't loved, but because they are needed. Every part of them, the hide becomes shelter, the bone becomes tool, the meat becomes strength for the days ahead. It is not desecration, it is gratitude. You've seen men whisper before they cut. You've seen them kiss the forehead before they raise the blade. And when they eat, later, they do not speak. The first time you taste horse meat, your stomach tightens. It feels like betrayal, but also communion. You remember the sound your horse made when it nuzzled your hand in sleep, how it turned its head toward the sun, how it galloped once without being asked, just for the joy of it. Now part of that joy lives in you, and you carry it forward. You learn that in the Mongol world, nothing is wasted. Not time, not space, not loss, especially not loss. A man without a horse is still a soldier, but only barely. You begin to understand why some men walk slower, even when given a new mount, why they touch the saddle as if it might break, why they name only one horse in a lifetime and never say that name aloud. That night you dream of galloping, but your feet strike the ground, not hooves, and you're not fast, you're not strong, you're just running, alone, and when you wake, you reach for your horse out of habit. He's still there, breathing, dreaming, and so are you. Not everyone rides. You notice them more now. The ones who move without hooves, who carry the same weight on their backs that others tie to saddles. Servants, camp followers, scouts whose horses died and were never replaced. Women wrapped in wool, their faces unreadable. Children too young to fight, too old to forget. They walk, sometimes ahead, more often behind. They are not part of the army, not officially, but they move with it, around it, through it, ghosts with hands, echoes that speak. You once believed the Mongol war machine was all riders and warriors galloping in unison across the earth. But that was a story. The truth is more complex, messier, human. For every man on horseback, there's someone walking, someone cooking, sharpening, mending. You pass them during marches, rarely make eye contact, but they see you, and you feel seen. One woman sharpens blades faster than the men who use them. A boy of 10 sets snares and feeds 20 mouths. A one-eyed man walks alone, always in silence, carrying a single stringed instrument he never plays. You don't know their stories, but you start to understand that the army doesn't just ride on horses. It rides on labor, on breath, on endurance that doesn't wear armor. They don't fight, but they bleed. They don't hold rank, but they hold everything together. And when they fall, there is no honor, no ceremony, just dust. But you remember them. You remember the woman who gave you a piece of dried apple when you hadn't eaten in days. You remember the boy who taught you how to walk without limping after a long ride. You remember the sound of that one-eyed man humming once when he thought no one was near. You begin to see that the real story isn't written by those who charge. It's written by those who walk, who carry the silence, who survive. And as the empire moves forward, it leaves more of them behind, not in graves, but in memory, and in the lines around your eyes. It happens slowly. At first, it's just a gap. The man who always rode beside you his horse falls lame. He drops back, promising to catch up. He doesn't. Then another disappears, lost in a skirmish. Maybe taken, maybe just gone. Soon, there's no one left who remembers when you joined. No one who knows the story you told about your first ride. No one who laughs the way they used to when you struggled to mount without stumbling. You look around and realize you're the last of your Arbon. Or maybe not the last, just the one who stayed. The Mongol army does not pause for grief. It absorbs, it replaces, it continues. New riders join, fresh faces, lighter voices, different rhythms. They do not know you, and you do not speak. You ride alone. Not physically, there are always men near you, but alone in the way that matters. Your thoughts echo now. You finish your meals in silence. You hum songs that no one else recognizes. One night, during a pause, you look out across the camp. Fires flicker like distant memories. You see them laughing, joking, sparring. You remember when that was you, and you wonder what changed. Not suddenly, not catastrophically, just over time You became a ghost in your own skin, still riding, still useful, still obeying, but untethered. You consider leaving, not defecting, there's nowhere to go, just stepping aside, letting the ride pass you, becoming one of those who walk behind. But then your horse shifts beneath you, sensing your hesitation. You steady it, your hands move without thought, and you realize something quietly devastating. You no longer remember how to stop. You are not made of bone and blood anymore. You are motion, you are dust, you are echo, and so you ride. Not toward anything, not away, just forward. Because that's all you know now. Forward. You used to think silence was absence. The lack of sound, of voice, of life. Now you know better. Silence is presence. It's the sound of memory settling, of meaning lingering in air already passed through. And when you leave a place now, it's not your voice that remains. It's the echo. Not of your words, there were few. Not of your name, no one spoke it. But of the sound you made when you rode through. The wind carved behind you. The pulse in the earth after hooves have gone. You start to feel it in your body, in your joints, in your chest. Everywhere you ride, you leave something behind. Not a trail, not a monument, but a rhythm. A pattern others might hear if they listen carefully enough. A villager wakes in the morning, walks outside, and stares at the dust still hanging in the air. He doesn't know your face, he doesn't know your cause, but he feels the silence you left, and he knows something passed through that cannot be returned. A child finds a horse's hoofprint in the grass, half filled with rain, tries to place their foot inside it. It doesn't fit, but they try again. And somewhere, a woman hums a song she hasn't sung in years, because something in the stillness reminded her of a dream she once had, of riders, of thunder, of stars falling. You did not speak to her, but the sound you made reached her anyway. That is how it works. The Mongol army doesn't plant flags, it doesn't write poems. It leaves sound, in air, in earth, in memory. You are part of that now. A note in a long, slow song. You ride, not for glory, not for gold, but because it is what you were shaped to do. And in the end, when the dust finally settles, when your horse no longer rises, when your bones become part of the steppe you crossed 100 times, someone will hear it, that faint echo, that nearly forgotten rhythm, and they will know you passed through. Winter on the steppe doesn't arrive, it descends, not like a guest or even a storm, like a judgment. One day you are riding across dead grass, feeling the promise of cold. The next, the world has vanished beneath white. There is no transition, no slow drift, just silence and snow, thick enough to erase your path, your scent, your name. The horses are just first. They snort, stamp, breathe steam. Their coats thicken. They paw at the earth with practiced motion, searching for grass below the crust. You do the same in your own way, layering wool over fur, leather over skin. Every movement slows. Every task becomes negotiation. Your fingers crack, your lips bleed, your breath escapes in short, sharp gasps. You've lived through winter before. Of course you have, but not like this. This winter has will. It wants something from you, and you don't know if you'll survive giving it. The army marches slower now, not from weakness, but precision. Every fire must be justified, every stop calculated. Men die in their sleep, not from wounds, but from forgetting to roll closer to the fire. You watch them, the slow stiffening of limbs, the way no one weeps, not because they don't care, but because grief would freeze in your throat before you could say the name. You ride past entire valleys locked under frost. Yurts collapsed under snow. Trees snapped mid-story. The world has stopped spinning, it seems. And yet you move, because movement, even now, is salvation. The veterans teach you how to eat ice without cracking your teeth, how to dry your boots over fire without warping the soles, how to tell when a man is cold enough to lie. The secret is in the eyes. They stop blinking. You keep your horse close at night. Let it share heat. You whisper to it, sometimes, not words, just sound. Because in this white silence, sound is the last warmth. You begin to dream of summer, not as memory, as myth. A green world, a slow river, a sky that doesn't punish. But each morning you wake under the same heavy breath of ice, and you mount again, and you ride. Because the winter doesn't care about your dreams, and the empire doesn't pause for frost. And you are still part of both. You start to eat differently in the cold. Gone are the careful portions, the attempts at moderation. There is no indulgence, here only survival. You eat what is handed to you, and then you eat again. Fat, more fat, meat, dried and hard, boiled if you're lucky, raw if you're desperate, and always heat. Heat you can swallow, heat you can keep. The older riders say hunger kills faster in winter because it's quiet. You don't feel the gnawing so much, just the slipping. Your thoughts slow, your hands lose memory, your steps betray you, so you eat. You drink the milk that curdles on your tongue. You sip the broth that tastes like leather. You chew the tendon until your jaw aches. Because somewhere inside that mess is a fire, and it's the only one that won't go out when the wind rises. One day a deer is brought down. Rare meat, fresh blood. They let it drain into a pot. Add nothing, heat it. Pass it around. You drink without hesitation. It warms your chest, then your stomach, then your bones. And for a moment, just a moment, your body remembers what it feels like not to be afraid of cold. The fire in the belly. It's not about fullness. You are never full. No one here is. But it is about continuation. About the next hour, the next mile. You learn tricks. How to store fat in hide wraps inside your coat. How to mix fermented grain into curd. How to stretch dried blood into paste with snow and still keep moving. You stop thinking about flavor. You start thinking about calories as currency. One rider keeps a pouch of dried horse intestines. Another eats nothing but milk curds for 3 days. You do what they do, because the cold doesn't care if you're noble. The snow doesn't remember what rank you hold, only that your fire burns or it doesn't. You realize something else, too. The hunger never fully leaves, even when you eat, even when you're warm. It becomes part of you, a companion, a signal that you are alive, still consuming, still fighting the frost from the inside out. The wind howls. You tighten your cloak. You wipe your mouth, and you mount again. The fire is small, but it moves with you. And for now, that is enough. You don't feel it at first. The numbness is gentle, almost kind. Your fingertips go pale, then grey, then a shade of white you've never seen in skin before. Someone notices. A grunt, a pointed finger, a shake of the head. You look down and understand. Your hands are not your own anymore. Frostbite isn't loud. It doesn't scream like a wound or throb like an infection. It whispers, eats in silence. You ride with your hands tucked under your arms. You stuff them into the horse's mane. You press them against your chest, under your coat, next to the only heat you still trust. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. You see what happens when it doesn't. Black fingers, skin that peels like bark, joints that won't bend. One man cuts off a toe by the fire. No screaming, just a short breath, then a shrug. Another loses part of his nose. It turns purple first, then flakes off into his bowl of curds. No one laughs, no one turns away, because winter is not cruel. Winter is exact. It takes what you fail to protect. Nothing more, nothing less. You wrap your hands in strips of wool, then in fur, then in prayer. But the cold finds the cracks. In the night, you dream of summer, but not beaches or sun or green things. You dream of sensation, touch, heat, pain that isn't from cold. You begin to understand what true vulnerability feels like. Not fear of death, but fear of disappearing one piece at a time. You become a tally. For fingers good, 2 toes still yours, lips split but healing. You stop thinking of your body as whole. You start thinking in parts, in percentages, and still you ride, because to fall behind is to freeze. And to freeze is not to die, but to vanish. The frost waits, it watches. It does not rush. It has all the time in the world. You speak less in winter, not from discipline, not from fear, but because words freeze in the air and fall dead between you. There's nothing left to say, anyway. Everything important has already been thought, all lost, or turned to steam and vanished into the breath of your horse. You ride for hours, sometimes days, without speaking. At first, it feels unnatural. Then it feels like truth. You begin to realize how much noise was unnecessary, how many sentences were spent trying to fill silences that were already full. Now, the silence carries everything. Fatigue, grief, kinship, endurance. You ride beside a man for 12 days. You never ask his name. He never offers it, but he hands you water when your skin cracks. He lifts your foot into the stirrup when your joints seize. He wakes you when you almost sleep too long and don't wake at all. You begin to think of him as your brother, and he is. Not by blood, not by oath, but by proximity. You speak once on the 13th day, just one word, storm. He nods. You both tighten your cloaks. No more is needed. This is winter language, sparse, necessary. You come to revere silence, to see it not as emptiness, but as structure. The way the cold holds its breath. The way snow falls without a sound and still changes everything. The steppe becomes a kind of cathedral. No walls, just wind. No altar, just fire. Your prayers are gestures now, your absolutions, survival. At night, the camp is quieter than you've ever known. Only the creak of leather, the shift of weight, the occasional cough that sounds like something trying not to be remembered. And always the horses, soft noises, breath against hide, the occasional sigh, as if they, too, are waiting for the world to turn. You lie on your side, eyes open, staring into a sky so clear it feels hollow. You say nothing, and for the first time, it feels like enough. Eventually, the snow stops falling. Not because winter ends. Winter never ends. It just changes its shape. The sky turns pale instead of grey. The wind grows quieter, not warmer. The ice thickens, deepens, disappears beneath dust. And beneath it, things stir. You see a blade of grass once, tiny, green, defiant. You kneel beside it, not to pick it, to believe in it. A man beside you laughs, just once. A sound so brief, you wonder if you imagined it. You don't ask why. You just let it hang in the air, unspoiled. There are signs of return, but not of revival. The dead are still dead. The frostbitten walk slower. The horses have thinner coats, but the wear shows in their eyes. And you are not who you were when the cold began. You move more carefully now, not cautiously, with reverence. You've learned how quickly things vanish, how brittle breath can be, how little it takes to be erased. You keep a pouch of salt tied to your belt, not for food, for memory. Salt was the only thing that didn't freeze. It reminds you what you're made of. You walk beside your horse more often now, not because it's weak, because sometimes you want to feel the ground beneath you, to remind it and yourself that you still belong to the land. You start to speak again, a little, not much, a sentence here, a name you whisper to the wind, just to see if it still fits in your mouth. You still don't tell stories, but one night, by the fire, you say this: I saw a man catch a snowflake on his tongue, and smile. No one responds. No one needs to. The words sit there like warmth, like proof, because that's what the end of winter gives you. Not comfort, not victory, but evidence. That you remained, that something lived, a crack in the ice, a breath in the dark, a moment of green against the white, and the soft, undeniable fact of your own feet still moving. You don't meet him, not really. You see the dust rise when he passes. You hear the hush fall across camp like a dropped blanket. You feel the shift in posture, in breath, in the air itself. But the Khan is not a man here. He is a presence, a direction. They say he walks like someone who was never a child, that his eyes don't blink unless they mean to, that when he speaks, even the horses listen. You're told not to look at him, not directly, so you don't, but your eyes drift anyway, out of instinct, out of that old hunger to see what power looks like when it's still warm. You glimpse him once, from behind, a thick coat, fur-lined, sword hanging low, not because he needs it, but because it belongs there. He is not tall, not shining, but the men around him shift, as if gravity changes in his orbit. Later, someone swears he smiled. Another says he hasn't smiled since his brother died. Another says he never had a brother. The stories tangle like thread. They say he was born clutching a clot of blood, that wolves followed him through childhood, that lightning struck the tree he slept beneath twice. You don't care if they're true, because what matters isn't what he is. It's what he becomes when you speak his name. Genghis, it tastes heavy, like metal on the tongue, like something that shouldn't be said unless you mean it. You realize something strange. You don't fear him. You need him. Because in a world where everything moves, he doesn't. He anchors it. He decides where the empire flows next. And when he turns his gaze east or west, or toward the hills, the world shifts. You are not part of his thoughts. Not directly, but you are part of his will, his breath, and that is enough. Because the shadow of the Khan is long, and it does not need to touch you to move you. Orders do not come as commands, not in the way you'd expect. There's no bellowing, no scrolls read aloud by men in ornate robes, no ceremony. They come like weather, a change in direction. A messenger who rides hard, speaks once, and vanishes. A gesture from a man whose face you don't know, but whose word is law. And behind it all, the calm, not seen, not heard, but unmistakably felt. It's as if the wind carries his thoughts. The men around you repeat them, not as orders, but as truths. We move at first light. There will be no looting. He wants the engineers alive. No one questions the source. No one says how they know. They just know, because that's what it means to live under the shadow of the Khan. You don't wait for his voice, you carry it. His will is not communicated, it is absorbed. You begin to speak less, because the words aren't yours. Even when you give instructions, they're borrowed, shaped by what you imagine he would want. What would please him? What would avoid death? You start to think differently. Not what you should do, but what he would do. Would he burn this town? Would he leave the child alive? Would he send the scouts deeper, knowing they may not return? It's not worship, it's architecture. His mind becomes the blueprint for how you survive. You're told, once, in a whisper, that the Khan has hundreds of children, that he's claimed more of the world through lineage than through conquest. You imagine them dozens of sons, all with his shadow behind their eyes, speaking in his cadence, ordering in his tone. You wonder if they carry his voice, or if it devours theirs. One night, you dream that you speak with his voice, deep, measured, unforgiving. When you wake, your own voice sounds foreign, smaller, less necessary. You say nothing that day, and no one notices. Because here, only one voice matters, and it is not yours. There is no paper, no proclamations nailed to trees, no gilded books, no signed decrees sealed with wax. And yet there is law. It lives in memory, in custom, in what is done and what is not done. They call it the yasa, a word that tastes like flint, like something struck hard and fast. You were told, do not steal, do not betray your brothers, do not speak ill of your commanders, do not break the circle of the hunt, and do not forget. The laws are not taught, they are enforced. You break them once, and someone disappears. Break them twice, and you disappear. But it isn't fear that holds the army together. Not entirely, it's rhythm. The same way a river doesn't need to be reminded where to go. The same way birds don't forget how to turn together in the sky. The Mongol army remembers how to move. The law is embedded in movement. You know not to eat until your commander has eaten. You know not to speak over another man's kill. You know never to ride ahead of the lead scout. Not because someone told you, because someone didn't have to. The yasa is invisible, but it is everywhere. You hear stories that if a soldier drops something in the dust and another finds it, it must be returned. That even the Khan's own family is not exempt, that one of his sons was lashed for drinking before the rite. You don't know if these stories are true. You don't need them to be, because the idea of the law is more powerful than the law itself. It creates shape, edges, friction. Without it, the army would dissolve into fire and loot. With it to become something stranger, more precise, more permanent, a force. You realize that's what law is, in the end. Not words, not punishment, not justice, but gravity. A pull you obey without thinking, without seeing, without needing to ask why. And here, under the sky of Genghis Khan, it holds. They rise at dawn, silent, effortless, as if the wind itself were lifting them. Black cloth, simple, threadbare, and on each no symbol, no lion, no dragon, no empire emblazoned in gold, just 9 white yak tails, tied, hanging, the sold. The spirit banner of Genghis Khan. You ask once what it means. An older soldier frowns. It doesn't mean, he says. It is. You do not ask again. Instead, you watch. The way the banner moves when no one else does. The way men glance at it before mounting. The way it's never touched by bare hand. The banner rides, always ahead. Even when the Khan isn't there. Even when the battle is far behind, even when the sky turns black with ash, and you understand it isn't a symbol of power, it is power. When it is raised, the army breathes as one. When it falls, something more than cloth dies. But it does not fall. Not once, not ever in your time. And this becomes a comfort greater than armor, greater than fire. The banner remains. You hear stories whispered across campfires, how the banner was woven from the tails of the Khan's favorite horses, how it holds his soul, how it points not to where he is, but where he will be. You start to believe this, not out of faith, out of observation. Wherever the banner rides, people follow. Land falls. Cities kneel, not to a man, to a cloth, to an idea. One night, you dream of it. The banner stands in a field of bones, unmoving in a windless sky. You reach for it, not to hold it, just to be near it. And in the dream, it turns away, as if to say, "You do not lead me, I lead you." You wake with your heart pounding, not with fear, with clarity, because now you understand what moves this empire. Not hunger, not war, not even the will of a man, but a banner, a whisper, a presence that does not need to speak to command. You expect to die. You expect it every day, not from battle that would be clean, but from something quieter, a fever, a slip on ice, a spear meant for someone else, the wrong word at the wrong time, and yet you don't. You ride, you sleep, you wake. Again, you begin to wonder if death has forgotten you, or worse chosen to wait. Because in this army, death is not an end. It's a rotation, a turning of the wheel. You've seen men die with no name and become songs. You've seen a single arrow kill a general and change the shape of 10 nations. You've seen boys too young to bleed rise with blades and not fall. And still, you remain. You hear rumors, as you always do, that the Khan does not die, that his breath has become the wind itself, that his grave is unmarked, untouched, protected by 1,000 ghosts who would rather kill than reveal. You believe some of it, not because it makes sense, but because it should be true. Because how else can something so vast, so unstoppable, so endlessly in motion simply end? You wonder what your own death will look like. You don't picture battle. You don't picture peace. You picture a cold field, a quiet morning, your horse grazing, not knowing, and the wind moving past you as if it has somewhere better to be, and that feels right. Because in this life, nothing stays, not names, not pain, not even fear, only the ride, only the breath, only the banner, only the shadow that never touches you, but never leaves. And so you keep going. Because if death won't come, then maybe you'll meet him halfway, somewhere beyond the edge of the map, where no roads lead, where even the Khan's voice fades. But not today. Today you ride. You pass through cities the world no longer remembers, places with names you can't pronounce, walls cracked like dried skin, markets that once smelled of spice and smoke now silent. No one fights when you arrive, not anymore. They bow, they offer tribute, they give daughters and grain and gold because resistance is expensive, and history has taught them thrift. You don't plunder, not unless ordered. You don't burn, not unless it serves a purpose. But still things vanish. Languages fade, customs dissolve. Streets are renamed or erased. You walk through temples that have been turned into stables, schools that now house grain, statues whose eyes have been gouged clean. The city lives, in shape, but not in soul. And you wonder, is this conquest, or is it erasure? The children don't look you in the eye. The old ones look too long. You buy bread from a woman who pretends not to notice your accent. She hands you 2 loaves instead of 1. You don't correct her. Later, you hear she was killed for feeding soldiers without a ledger mark. You don't sleep well that night, because the city gave you what you needed, and you gave it nothing. You move on. That's the law. No roots, no apologies, no graves, just forward. The next city greets you with music. Forced, cheerful, trembling. You pretend to enjoy it. You eat their food, drink their wine. You nod when they bow. And when you leave, the silence behind you is louder than the music ever was. You start to understand the weight of forgetting. Not the kind that comes with age. The kind that's given to others. You helped build a world, but it will never carry your name. You are not the statue. You are the wind that wears it down. And someday, someone will ride through these ruins. Ask who lived here, what they believed, why they vanished, and the answer will be simple. The Mongols passed through and took the memory with them. You look at the map, not a parchment one, not lines drawn in ink, but the one in your mind, the one built from sweat and wind and motion. It is full of gaps, places you passed too quickly to remember, rivers you crossed without knowing their names, mountains that vanished in the fog before you could name their shape. And yet there it is, a vast continent of half-formed memories, stitched together by hooves and firelight. But when others ask you where you've been, you hesitate, because you realize something unsettling. The world you moved through was never yours. You borrowed it, you rode across it, but you did not belong to it. You were a shadow passing over soil that did not mark you. The cartographers come later, with rulers and quills. They redraw the empire with borders, with colors, with names you never heard spoken aloud. And they write, Mongol Empire, from ocean to steppe, from sunrise to snow. But you don't recognize it, because the empire you rode for was not a shape. It was a feeling, a momentum, a fever. And maps don't show that. They don't show the campfires, the shared silences, the sound of leather creaking at dawn, the faces you forgot before you ever remembered them. You read a history book once, long after you dismounted. It said the Mongols were cruel, efficient, inhuman. You closed it, because cruelty isn't the story, nor is conquest. The story is movement. The story is hunger. The story is loss dressed in discipline. You wonder if anyone will ever map that. Not the land taken, but the selves abandoned. Not the borders drawn, but the men unmade. You fold the map in your mind, place it somewhere deep, somewhere no ink will ever reach, and you keep riding, even now, even after it's over, even when there's no place left to conquer, because some part of you refuses to stop. And that part, that unrecorded part, is the truest map you'll ever carry. It's not the metal that weighs you down. The plates are light enough, beaten thin, hammered, smart. You've worn them so long they feel like skin. But the weight you carry now, it's older, quieter. It's the weight of watching, of surviving, of knowing what happened and saying nothing. Because silence, too, is armor. You used to dream of removing it all, of stepping out of the harness, the straps, the furs, of standing bare under an open sky, unmarked, unburdened. You tried once, after a long ride. After a battle you don't remember starting, you stripped down by a stream, let the water bite your ankles, closed your eyes. You thought, now I am clean. But when you looked into the water, You saw someone you didn't know, someone thinner, harder, grayer, and the reflection did not flinch. That's when you understood. The armor was never the iron, it was the choices, the roads taken, the silences kept, and those you cannot take off. You carry them into the villages you don't burn, into the conversations you avoid, into the way you flinch when someone laughs too loudly. It becomes posture, breath, habit. You are always on watch, even when there is nothing left to guard. Others don't see it. They see a soldier, or a rider, or worse, a hero. But they do not see the nights you sleep in pieces, the ghosts you feed with memory, the joy that lands too late, like a bird startled from a tree. You begin to wonder if the armor will ever leave you, if someday, far from the steppe, in a quiet room, with warm bread and a soft bed, you'll still reach for a blade before you reach for peace. And if that happens, will it mean you lost or survived? There is no answer, only the armor fitted too well to your shape. Soft now, with age, but never loosened. You stand, you dress, you mount, and you ride. Because some burdens are not lifted, they are carried. You used to picture it, a hut, or a room, a door that creaks in a familiar way, bread baking, a voice you recognize without needing to think. Home, it was never much, just the thought of somewhere that would be glad you returned. But the longer you ride, the less clear it becomes. Was it a real place, or something you invented to make the marching easier? You try to remember the path back, the name of the river near your village, the sound of the bell your mother rang for supper, but it blurs. Your memory has been edited by distance, by repetition, by survival. And when you finally turn your horse, when you finally decide to ride back just to see, what you find isn't what you pictured. The road is overgrown, the gate is gone, the field is fallow. The child who carved your name into the barn wall is a grown man now, or a grave. You ask an old woman about your family. She squints, nods slowly. I remember a boy like that. He left. You wait for more. She does not offer it. And you realize, this place is still here. But you are not. Not in the way they knew. Not in the way they kept. You became something else. Something shaped by wind and war and winter. There is no room for that version of you here. So you smile, you nod, you ride on, because it's easier than explaining. You sleep under a different roof. You share bread with strangers. You tell no stories. And when the wind rises, you don't brace against it. You ride into it. Because sometimes the only home you have is the one that forgets your name as softly as it once called it. There comes a day quiet, unmarked, when you realize no one is leading you. No scout, no banner, no orders from above. Just the open steppe and your breath, and the distant hum of hoofbeats that might be memory or wind. You slow your horse, not to stop, there is no stopping, but to feel something. Not the weight of armor, or the ache of distance, or even the pull of duty. Just the air. It smells of rain, though none falls. It carries no scent of war. It is the kind of air that feels like a beginning, or maybe an ending, dressed in gentleness. You dismount. Your legs remember how to stand. Barely. You walk a few steps without purpose, and the horse doesn't follow. He stays, still, watching. You don't speak. He doesn't need you to. You sit in the grass, not because you're tired, because it feels like the only honest thing left to do. Above you, clouds drift like forgotten names. Below, the earth holds the heat of all the fires that came before you. You run your hand through the dirt. It feels the same everywhere, and yet different. You've crossed deserts, mountains, rivers that changed their course. You've slept beside the bones of kings and the songs of peasants. You've been a conqueror, a ghost, a brother, a stranger. And now you are simply a man, one of many, one who rode and watched and waited, and who will be forgotten, but not by the land, not by the wind, not by the horse who still stands beside you, breathing softly. There are no witnesses, no tomb, no tale, only this moment. And that is enough, because not all stories end with a battle. Some end with stillness. And in that stillness, if you listen carefully, you can still hear the echo of hooves. Far away, fading, but never gone. The story ends here, softly, like snow melting before dawn, like the last breath of a horse after a long ride. There's nowhere else to go. You've reached the edge of the map, the end of the song, the silence after centuries of thunder. But if you're still awake, if you're still listening, know this: somewhere in the dust of forgotten empires, there is a place where you rode. And though the world may not remember your name, the wind does, the earth does, and I do. Rest now, rider. You've come far, and you are not alone. Thank you for watching. Really thank you for staying with me, all the way to the quiet end. If this journey meant something to you, if it helped you drift off or simply feel less alone for a while, I'd be honored if you'd subscribe to the channel, only if it feels right. No pressure, just if you'd like to wander through history together again someday. And if you feel like sharing, tell me where in the world you're listening from, or what time it is right now. I love knowing who's out there in the dark. Until next time, rest well, ride slow, and have a good night.